Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Food, Wine, and Whiskey in Your Own Backyard. I am Rob, your host, and very excited to be joined today by Glenn Hugo, the head winemaker at Girard in Napa Valley. Glenn, how you doing?
Doing well. Great to be here.
Man, good to have you on. Appreciate you coming on and chatting with us a little bit.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
So first and foremost, I know the last couple of years have been kind of tough in Napa, tough for the world, I guess you could say, with the whole COVID thing. But those of us who love wine and want to support those folks in wine countries, how's everybody doing up in Napa? Are things, I think tastings and things like that are starting to come back a little bit, maybe more than some might think.
Yeah, absolutely. We're all but open. There's still some mask requirements walking in, but once somebody sits down, they're allowed to remove their masks and start a tasting and enjoy throughout the tasting and converse with our staff and not only get to enjoy the wines but hopefully learn a little bit about them, learn about Napa more, specifically our new home, which is in Calistoga, and kind of talking about some of our history and exposing them to all that is Girard. And there's some cool history with it. It's been around for quite a while, and that said, we're still small enough that some people haven't heard of us, even though we've got presence even in the wholesale side. So you'll see us in Texas, which have been there for quite a while.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I actually get to go home on occasion to promote the wines, which is always fun because that was my home. And to be able to come back and share something that now I'm able to share with friends and family in the Texas market is a lot of fun.
Well, you bring up history and you bring up Texas being kind of home for you. Let's kind of put that story together for everybody listening, because I think a lot of people, when they start talking about or thinking about Napa wines, and to a big degree this is true, it's a lot of families in Napa that work at these different wineries and vineyards and everything, that have really built up what Napa is today, that long history and tradition of families growing grapes and making fantastic wines. But there's a lot, I say a lot, there's a few people like you who, and I'll let you tell the story, but fell in love with wine and decided to go to Napa and start that journey. And you did that. Tell everybody kind of what your history is, your story is. How did you fall in love with wine? Start there.
Oh yeah, well my affinity with wine developed through the restaurant industry. After I graduated college, I'd been working in the restaurant industry, and I was afforded the opportunity to travel and open restaurants throughout the country. And with that, I became more involved in the beverage side of things, more specifically, even with the wine lists and having to develop wine lists, pairing them with the foods, the restaurant, and then also having to train it. I always believe when you're teaching, you can learn as much as you teach as well. And that just sparked more and more interest to learn about wine. And eventually, living out of Houston, I met my wife to be, and Pam and I. We would we would run to Napa, Sonoma, all parts of California and beyond, any chance we got, even if it was just for a quick weekend getaway. I think back then you could get a flight from Houston to Sacramento for under $50. And so every chance we got, we'd come out. And initially being in the restaurant industry, we were kind of always courted, and we got fancy meals and fancy tastings, which were a lot of fun. But ultimately, there was more interest in learning about the winemaking side and the vineyard side of things. And so as those trips kind of the more frequent we had them, more and more I asked, the wineries to, afford me time with, the vineyard manager, the winemaker, the enologist, anybody in the team that I could learn from. And that turned into some really cool interactions that just made it more and more fascinating for me. And so, as the story goes, Pam and I uh, actually kind of made the decision on the night of our or on our honeymoon. Um, we were, celebrating having just been married in Houston, but had headed out to Hawaii, and we were enjoying wine and talking about wine. That's kind of where the conversation was sparked, and the idea of doing something crazy, which was to quit our jobs, leave our family in Houston and head out to California. And, Napa just logically, it was the place that I was initially attracted to because, I hold it with such high esteem. Not that I don't love other parts of California's winemaking. I'm also a winemaker in Sonoma as well, and I equally enjoy the wines we make in Sonoma. And I've long been a fan of other regions, Paso, Santa Barbara, etc. So it's been a fun ride. We quit our jobs in 2003, and about 6 months after we married, we were moving out to Napa, and initially just started looking for jobs, knocking on doors, and eventually started getting asked to help people even on weekends or gratis, and here for a couple bottles of wine, come help us, and started learning that way, and that landed me jobs here and there, mostly at smaller places. But eventually I got the opportunity to work at Girard as an intern, and that was in 2006. So about 3 years of kind of, exploring Napa, working different places. Girard came along, and as an intern, I went through my first harvest, and then that turned into I was there, and I loved it, and I grew within the Girard family over the years until I took on the winemaking role. And I just celebrated my 15th year at Girard.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Congratulations on that. That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. I just think it's great that, and I didn't even catch if you said it, but when you talk about going to college, you went to UTEP, didn't you? Or where'd you go?
Yeah.
Yeah, in El Paso.
In El Paso.
So you
where I was born and raised initially.
So, a lot of people don't think of, I think people would think of Houston as kind of a food and wine and, whiskey type of community. But you coming from El Paso, I mean, you're the furthest west you can get in Texas to kind of, almost as far east as you can go in Texas, and then all the way out to Napa. So it's been quite a journey for you to get, from your roots in El Paso all the way to Napa. To me, it was a very cool part of your adventure, if you will.
Yeah, it's been quite a ride. I mean, we love our home now. It was quite a change though back then, to go from, the bustling town of Houston. I mean, there's so much going on, and Napa's much sleepier,
Yeah.
Although from when we first got here, there was like one bar to hang out in downtown Napa. Subsequently, I ended up working at that place for a while. Little wine bar in Napa called Bounty Hunter. Pam even worked there for a little bit, and we met. We got to meet everybody. That's what was so cool about it. You'd be working, and somebody'd walk in the door, and you'd recognize them from the front page of the Wine Spectator. And
oh wow,
it's always fun to see people and get to know them, or they introduce you, and they don't initially tell you their full name. They just say they're so and so, and then as you get to know them, a few visits in, they finally mention something about their last name, and you're like, oh, that that family, I know that name all too well. And so that's I think even working in that little wine bar for a while was a big step for me.
Yeah.
In fact, that's actually how I got introduced to Girard. The winemaker for the wine bar, he was making the wines for them, was a consulting winemaker for Girard. His name's Marco De Giulio. And Marco, part of my gig working in the wine bar, the owner, said, if you work for me and help me out here, I'll introduce you to Marco, and maybe you could work for him someday. And that's exactly what happened. I worked in the wine bar for about 2.5 years, and then took a break from it to work harvest, thinking I was just working harvest, and then I'd come back to it. But that's kind of where I dug in, and since then, I never left. And it's a really great experience to get introduced to all these different people in the industry, and just see the openness. I come from a business background. That's my degree from college, and so I'm coming out here without any science background necessarily, which is a big part of the job. But there's so many people here that are willing to teach and develop, and that's one thing I really appreciate about the industry. It reminds me a lot of the restaurant industry. If you're inexperienced, let's say in the culinary side of things, if you work your butt off, You can get into a restaurant, and as they see you're passionate about it and you're hardworking, you have those two things going for you. People will open their doors. They'll show you their techniques and their approaches to things. And much like the culinary world, what I saw in the winemaking world that um, people are open to help develop you. And I'm very proud that we do that at Girard a lot. I mean, there's a lot of my former interns, former employees that are now assistant winemakers, and all over the world too. It's really awesome to see this industry when somebody much like myself grows in it, but even when they get the chance to like explore the world of wine, like literally, and now they're a winemaker in New Zealand. I have a guy that worked with me who's a winemaker in New Zealand now. And I was actually on a trip recently, and I saw his bottle of wine sitting on the shelf,
Is
and
that
it
right?
was just, yeah, it was really cool. I had to
Yeah,
send him a pic of it and say, "Hey, I found you this little retail shop and so and so," and he's like, "Man,
that's
what
very
a
cool.
world."
Yeah. Well,
So that's what's great about it.
and you talk about it being, that kind of tight knit community. And that's what I see when I go out there, because all the winemakers and people who work in all the different wineries and vineyards and everything know each other. And I think that's fantastic. It's like a small, it is a small town. But it makes me think back to, and if people listening haven't seen the movie Bottle Shock, I think it's a great show to kind of give that, when Glenn, would you agree that's kind of what put Napa on the map in '76 when the tasting happened, that kind of. But the movie, I think, was a great movie, one, to kind of give you that history of Napa, but two, it pointed to what you were talking about, how all of them worked together. If one winery did well, the whole region did well. And I think that's still there today. When we come and visit and we talk to winemakers, we still get that, that people, they'll mention other people and talking to them and getting together and drinking wines together. And I think that's just fantastic that it's still there. It stayed that way because it's gotten very commercialized, not just in the wine world, whether it's spirits or whatever. And when big business starts to kind of get into it, there's a risk that you might lose that, because it becomes more about the bottom line than, fingers in the dirt and really what are we doing. But to see that so many of you all have been able to keep doing what you're doing, I think it's just fantastic.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, that's one of the things I've appreciated about what the business has held on to, the industry. That even with that, industrial or not industrial, but as the industry's grown and become more commercialized, there's still a close knit community within even winemaking specifically, but just the wine industry as a whole in Napa and Sonoma for that matter.
Yeah.
I love seeing it. I love being a part of it.
And I'm with you. I love a lot of California, all the regions, and you mentioned most of them. But today, let's talk a little bit about Napa, or mostly about Napa. If you want to jump on something else, we can. But I think a lot of people just say, I like wine from Napa, or people who are listening to this that go, I'm drinking wine in Napa, but they may not really understand the region and how we go from the lower part of the valley all the way up north to Calistoga. How would you describe the valley to them, the changes in elevation, the changes in soil types that are all over and different? And all of these play a huge role in the wines that are made in the different AVAs.
Yeah, I mean, I've always kind of thought of Napa or tried to describe it in the sense that, here we have what's a relatively small region if you think about it. I mean, we're about 30 miles by 5, and as you mentioned, the lower southern part of Napa, which is the sub AVA down there, the viticultural area, um, uh, is Carneros, and that's close to the bay, a lot cooler. A lot of people are growing Chardonnay and Pinot Noir down there for that reason. There are other varietals that do well down there, but those are kind of the two that we are enamored with, I guess we think about most. And then as you move your way up the valley, you change in temperature. You can have a 15-degree variable from the southern to the northern tip of Napa. So in this little 30 by 5 mile valley, we have that kind of difference just in temp. And that doesn't include what happens up on the hillsides. We're a valley surrounded by mountain ranges. And in those ranges, you start thinking about the sub AVAs, Mount Veeder. You get into Spring Mountain and Diamond Mountain. On the opposite side of the valley, we have Atlas Peak, which eventually moves into Howell Mountain. And there's obviously differences there, not only with elevation and temperature, but as you mentioned, soil types are a whole nother part of the conversation. And the way it works in California or in the United States, as far as viticultural areas, is based on proving to the government, in a sense, when a group of wineries can work together usually and say that this region is unique for these reasons of soil type. Elevation might be part of it, temperature. Um, because we are different in that regard, we want to be presented as our own special region. And that's how the cultural areas get determined. And within Napa, we talk about Napa Valley as a whole, but we know all these sub appellations that have a lot of cachet with them as well, like Oakville, Rutherford, in the mountain regions of Diamond, Owl Mountain, Mount Veeder, Atlas, even regions that are kind of starting just to get more of a name for themselves, like Yountville, Coombsville. There's areas in Napa that are still have a long way to go as far as getting people's affinity to grow for those regions. But there's great grapes throughout the valley, and that diversity, even in this kind of somewhat small area, is what makes Napa special and unique.
Yeah, and it's you mentioned the weather, and it's that you have that change in the diurnal change at night. I mean, you can be up in the, I don't know, what does it get there? Low to mid 90s for highs, typically in the summertime, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, into harvest September, October, we can see, we can hit into the hundreds,
And then
but usually it's in the 90s
you'll
on
drop what,
average.
40, 45 degrees at night?
Exactly, and that's something that
That's important,
when
right?
yeah, the maturity of the grape, that's what makes it special in that sense that we have the grapes ripen throughout the day, but at night those cooler temperatures allow them to kind of calm down and rest overnight.
Yeah.
Much like we need a good night's sleep, the grapes do as well, and that's what helps with elongating some of that maturity over a period of time. The last thing we want is just a huge heat spike. Okay, the grapes are suddenly this high in Brix. Well, that fast change in sugar level isn't necessarily the way we want it to happen. We want it to be a slow progression, and that's what helps develop the flavors and the uniqueness of wine grapes by them slowly maturing on the vine. So, we use the term hang time often in the industry, but it's that sense of that the grapes, will mature on a path that you will start to notice not only the grapes getting sweeter, but the flavors developing in the grapes. And for most winemakers, myself included, we may use some chemistry to kind of keep track of the grapes as we go, but it really is determination by tasting the grapes. In fact, by the time harvest is over, the last thing in the world I want to see, like on a cheese platter anywhere,
Yeah.
is grapes. I've had so many grapes by then. My stomach is just like, no more grapes. But that's really how we determine when they're ready. There's a maturity there that's not just about the sugar conversion; it's about the character of the grapes as well.
So a lot of people, try to compare Old World to Napa. What a Bordeaux might taste like because you hear a lot of, well, Napa uses Bordeaux grapes in their winemaking. But to me, they're very different. In your words, I mean, kind of how do you define what makes Old World kind of unique and what makes Napa different and kind of their own style?
Well, I think to be honest, we don't want to disregard our history. Napa does use a lot of the same varietals that historically come from Bordeaux, right? So we're known for Cabernet, but we also do a lot of Merlot. The five traditional grapes of Bordeaux, Cab Franc, Malbec, and Petit Verdot included in those five. And while Cabernet is king for us, we do grow those others, even if it's just to blend with Cabernet, which is where that history is in Bordeaux. The difference though is that we obviously, while we feel those grapes thrive here and they do really well, it is different than Bordeaux. And if you could just point to, the actual climate here as well, we are California. We have that sunshine. We see that ripeness that Bordeaux cannot get. So Bordeaux traditionally will never be as ripe as a California wine. I mean, I shouldn't say never, but that's not what they usually
Traditionally, yeah.
deal with. Yeah. So most of their grapes will get to a certain maturity, and that's as far as they'll go. California, historically, we wouldn't even let ourselves go that far. We'd pick them earlier, but as the style of California winemaking in Napa, even more specifically, developed, winemakers started looking, vineyard owners and vineyard managers started looking to see if they could push that envelope a little bit and get a little riper and have more fruit be a part of the mix. And that's kind of the style we've hung on to. We've looked for that riper style. So that's why you'll see, our alcohols be elevated by comparison, but also we got ripe and we got those flavors that you don't necessarily would see in Bordeaux. But it's not to say I don't love and enjoy Bordeaux's. I
I
do,
know you
but it's
do.
different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was kind of my point of it is that I think some people, if you're an experienced wine person, you understand there's differences, even within Napa, just by the winemaker and their style and things like that. And obviously where the grapes are coming from. But that was my point is to kind of, understand that when you're drinking a cab, and I think a lot of people who, again, maybe not as experienced in wine, when they see Cabernet in Napa Valley, they think it's typically 100% cab. It says cab on the label, where we know it's usually still blended with something. You mentioned the other three varietals that a lot of times are used to blend with that. Where when they see in Bordeaux, it says Bordeaux, and there's this understanding that we already know it's a blend. And I think they kind of lose that in translation, not really understanding that Napa still blends a lot. I mean, most of your wine, there are some 100% of certain varietals, but for the most part, they blend as well. And it's just a different way of blending, the way you guys do things versus Old World.
Yeah, we on both sides of the fence, in France versus California, we have rules to follow. Bordeaux has their rules. Most of those are, going back hundreds of years, and they're based on these are the things that you can grow in this region, and that's it. You don't have options to do otherwise to be able to call it that wine. California, in the United States, we never wanted to be that, that mindset. But what we did do is find the regions that and see where varietals did well, and that's what thrived there. So just by the nature of what worked in that region and what sold well based on the character of the wine, capitalism at its finest. We found
Sure.
the right the right varietals, and Napa became known for it. But to your point, I mean, we have the ability to blend. As an example, if we're calling something a Cabernet, by definition, by law, we can blend up to 25% of other varietals in there. Now, I tend to lean more into 80 plus to 90% on most of our Cabernets. Some of them, occasionally, we do 100%, but I don't like to commit to that until the last minute. I really want the flexibility. And coming from the restaurant world, I'll constantly use restaurant references, but it's kind of like a chef being limited on what he can put in a dish. Even though you're calling that your lamb dish, you might use ingredients, spices that complement it or add to it. We want to have that flexibility so that if we need just a splash of Petit Verdot in the Cab blend, or the tannins are too big, so we want to soften it up with some Merlot, or let's say we feel like the aromatics need a lift, a little Cab Franc to kind of add some little bit of perfumey or floral characteristics. Or oftentimes I think of our Malbec as being really good kind of mid palate lift, to kind of avoid making what I call a donut hole wine, where
Yeah.
there's some really great up front, but then it pauses and nice finish. Well, the Malbec can kind of help create that bridge. So having that flexibility in blending, even though you're labeling something as a certain varietal, for me, it's important.
So do you find in Napa that certain varietals, whether it be just from Girard or just overall, does it grow Cabernet? Does it grow everywhere? Does everybody try to grow Cabernet because Cab is king and it just does better in certain areas? Or is it people have figured out that, Cab really doesn't do good in certain areas as.
Yeah, I mean, much like the history of Bordeaux, in the sense that it's taken, a long time to figure out what was right there, right? Um, and we're dealing with the same thing. But remember, our histories, while we've been growing grapes for over 100 something years in Napa, um, it was, with prohibition and everything. I mean, back to bottle shock as a bivvy, that's kind of where the tide turned. But we only had a handful of wineries here, even in the '60s. So
Yeah.
our history is much more condensed. But what we're doing is we are, it's Cabernet is king. We've planted it in a lot of places and seen where things might work or not work. But the thing you have to think about is it there's a lot of factors involved with that, and this is where it gets complicated. I mean, if you're going to decide to move to Napa and live in this area and plant a vineyard, you got to think about what your soil type is, and then you got to think about what clone you'd want to plant there. That also involves the rootstock you would plant on, and that there's a lot of variables there. There's a lot of opinions there. You could get 1,000 different opinions from 1,000 different people. Um, and then you look at orientation, how you plant it. You look at how wide you spread the vines out between each other and across rows. The orientation of how the sun's going to affect the growth pattern of those grapes based on how you plant the rows. There's all these ideas to decide upon, and you make all these decisions and you invest a lot of money into it, and time and effort and hard work. And about 3 years in, you'll start to appreciate how you did. About 7 years in, you'd probably say, "All right, we made all the right decisions," or "Man, I think we should have used a different clone or a different rootstock, or we should have planted them a little closer together." There's a lot of things that go into those decisions that take you years to figure out, if it was the right decision. So, um, again, only in a condensed, half of a century that Napa's been in like serious winemaking. We're we're doing pretty well if you think about it
I
compared to like places like Bordeaux that you're talking thousands of years.
I think you're doing great. I think most people in the world would admit that Napa is, they're on fire. I mean, really doing some cool things. And the reason I brought that up is you pointed out earlier, Glenn, how small the valley is. I mean, so even as small as the valley is, you still have to be that particular on where you're growing certain grapes and kind of what you're going to get from it and making those decisions. And still, it's not just hey, it's a small area, so no matter what you plant, it's going to grow well. It doesn't work. It's not that simple. We wish it were, but it's not. And to your point earlier, you guys don't have anything holding you back as far as varietal types, which I think is very cool because I love that, you guys do Syrahs and you do Petite Syrahs and you do, whatever grapes that you want to do. I think some people out there now are doing even Sangiovese and things like that in Napa that, traditionally – when you go to those Italian countries, there's a region, Tuscany, for Sangiovese, and there's, Nebbiolo is going to be up in Piedmont, and same like you said with Bordeaux or Rhone Valley for the GSMs and things like that. You have to grow specific grapes in specific regions, and you guys aren't restricted that way, which I think makes Napa, I don't know if you'd call it unique or different. I don't know other New World countries, do they do similar things as you, or is Napa special that way?
No, I think a lot of the New World is figured that out. And for us, we love making cab. We make quite a few cabs at Girard. I'm very proud of them, and they can be unique, for all these different reasons coming from these different appellations within the Napa Valley. But I also have fun making Zinfandel and Petite Sirah, and as you mentioned, like GSM blends and such. Um, you know, as a winemaker, you think of that as kind of like your, I don't know, it's almost like the specials menu at the restaurant, right? Like you're known for your steak. So for us, that's Cabernet. We're known for Cabernet and Cabernet blends, and we love them. But as a chef, I want to make some specials that are kind of fun and different. And for
Absolutely.
us, that's kind of like where Petite Sirah falls in. Like you mentioned about, we're a community here, and we might go to a barbecue or dinner somebody's house, and of course everybody that's in the industry is going to show up with their $150 bottle of Cabernet, and that's awesome. But sometimes you want to walk in with a bottle of Petite Sirah, or we have a field blend called Mixed Blacks, which is a lot of fun. You show up with that, or even Zen at a barbecue, and usually that wine's the first thing to go. People just love drinking it. So I like having those little smaller fun projects that are something a little different.
I think it's always fun to find that that wine too that punches way above its weight class. You know, when you mention your Petite Syrah, to me is one that I think is one of the best values in wine. When you talk about punching above its weight class, it's delicious and
Thank you.
not an expensive bottle. Um, Tell me if I'm wrong. I think I've read some articles, if I remember right, Glenn, that you know, old world, you always think of it being very traditional. We're talking about the innovative ways and the, you know, you mentioned comparing it to a chef. You like to have your specials, and you being a winemaker that likes to be creative and come up with new things. I think I've read somewhere where Napa has done so well in really coming up with some of these really cool wines that even old world is starting to pay attention and maybe start coming over and visiting with you all, seeing what you're doing. You guys are sharing, and they're starting to kind of open up and not be as hard lined as they may have been in the past as far as what they can do with their varietals and techniques and things like that.
Yeah, there's definitely a. I mean, I was talking about how the community of winemaking is always open. Well, even from the world's perspective, well, we may take jabs at other regions ourselves. I
Sure.
mean, I make wine in Napa and Sonoma, and anytime I go to Sonoma, and if anybody, whether they know I work in Napa as well or not, as soon as Napa comes up as a topic, you know, the classic line, Napa's for auto parts, you know, immediately get that from the Sonoma side. And I love Sonoma too, but it's like there's that natural kind of ribbing that we would do, even if I was saying something about Bordeaux or the Australians or whatever region, you know. But the thing about it is, you know, there is an openness there. Some of the new world techniques that we've all adopted in the new world, and that's not just California. You know, Australians have always been big on like trying things differently. But as things have developed, you see, you know, traditional winemaking regions starting to, you know, play with things and try things differently. And you know, it's sometimes it's hard to break really old world, you know, standards that have to, you know, they always felt like they had to be done a certain way. Um, and even when it comes to the varietal decisions as far as blending, you know, some regions that's the rule. If you want to call it that type of wine and add it to it, until they change that law, you have to do that. So anything that you do differently might declassify your wine. So if you added Syrah to Cabernet blend in Bordeaux, it would no longer be able to be called a Bordeaux. The irony is that there was a time back in the day before those laws were instituted that Bordeaux producers would go and get Syrah from the Rhone, you know, especially Côte Rôtie,
Yeah.
and they would blend a little in their Bordeaux blends, just not mentioning it. You know, it was always kind of it was a little secret technique that was used. So you know that history was there. It's just they, you know, when they decided to kind of make the outline in the laws, they did something a little different as far as what they would allow. But it's nice to see there is some, you know, acceptance of trying new things. And um, even those staunch, you know, French producers are going to make wine in the new world. Like there's so much investment in Napa from France, as an example, Italy, regions, you know, in the southern hemisphere, South America, Australia. You've seen for, you know, decades, uh, old world, uh, you know, respected wineries and families exploring the world to see what new world had to offer. So I think there's definitely, you know, there's a nod to both sides of that, of new and old, to each other, that we both have a lot to offer each other.
I think when we talk about, you know, we're kind of going through all the different things involved in winemaking, there's two other things I wanted to touch on. One is that I think a lot of people may have the perception that when they hear, you know, Girard or whatever brand it might be, they think all of the grapes are grown by that winery, and that's not necessarily the case. I mean, some may be, but farmers are very important to the success, and those relationships that wineries have with farmers are very important to the success of that winery. And you having the availability to get really good grapes to make the fantastic wines that you do.
Yeah, that is a great conversation piece, and I actually feel very fortunate working with Girard. I mean, we do own some of our own vineyards. We have some of our own grapes that we use in our blends. Even our new winery, which is our little background picture here, which is we moved into in 2018 up in Calistoga. we did plant vineyard around it. So that's kind of a new estate for us. It's, we're only into 4 years of production there, as far as grape growing. We made our first wines of it actually this year. So, takes a few years to get it going, but having your own estate vineyards is wonderful. I'd never, disregard brands or wineries that are state programs where they focus on just their grapes. I think that's great. But what I feel fortunate is that I also get to source grapes from all over Napa, and I work with these farmers, these families that some of them, third, fourth generation even. Their family's been growing grapes back in the day when they weren't growing grapes for commercial reasons. It was family wine. It was just to make wine for the family, and that history is awesome. But even giving me more complexity to play with, to have, just using Cabernet as an example, we get Cabernet from, Diamond Mountain, uh, Howell Mountains, Spring at times, Mount Veeder, Atlas Peak, and then within the valley, Rutherford, Oakville, even regions that are maybe less acknowledged at times, but like St. Helena, we have a Cabernet vineyard in St. Helena that it's one of my favorite vineyards of ours. It's consistently year after year, it's one of the best Cabernet vineyards we have. And so to have all that complexity to play with, again, using culinary references to, as a chef, having all these different ingredients to work on your craft with. For us, that's vineyard sourcing. We get that opportunity to play with a lot of different fruit from a lot of different regions within Napa, and even some that are lesser known don't have, a cachet of an Oakville or a Diamond Mountain. They still can produce really great grapes, and then you get into the complexity of all the other grapes we play with. So even finding, a very special, Malbec vineyard that, for us, we have one that's in Yountville that we've been using since I've been around. So 15 plus years now. It's a great vineyard for Malbec, and we wouldn't be able to use that if we were focused just on our estate, obviously. So
Right.
we love that complexity of being able to play with our own grapes, but also working with the vineyards. And when you work with them that long, they know what you're looking for. We have an understanding of each other. But even to that end, I'm constantly looking for new sources, and I love finding, the next new favorite vineyard of ours.
Yeah.
It's quite a lot of excitement to be able to kind of source out those new ingredients, so to speak.
So the last thing I want to touch on in kind of the winemaking process, I know there's a lot more to it, but these are just kind of, to me, the bigger things that stand out, and where you get your grapes is so important. But I think this is as well. And I don't think a lot of people really give enough credit, or maybe not, credit might not be the right word, acknowledgement. They don't acknowledge how important this is, at least I think it is. The cooperages that you get your barrels from, and, the types of wood, the chars, and how just their skill in being able to put barrels together to me is a huge part in making sure what you want to come out of that barrel is really, really good.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite topics, especially if we're at the winery walking around. Inevitably, we're going to be standing in the barrel room talking about that, tasting barrels. You know, uh, just yesterday, working on our blends for some 2019 Cabernets we'll be bottling in January. These are our Diamond, our Mount Veeder, our Howell Mountain, Atlas Peak. We do a Calistoga designate now, which is obviously our new home where
Love
we're at.
that.
Yeah, and to have the same really high quality Cabernet, um, but tasting it in all these different cooperages. Um, and every time we get into that moment of that blend, part of the blending process where we're actually selecting the single barrels that we want for the blend, it's so much fun. It's like if I could bottle that and share that with everybody, that to me is one of the most interesting things about winemaking. That, to your point, we talk about it on occasion, but it just to be able to see the nuances, the differences that each of those individual barrels make, as far as they're coming from a different producer, they may be sourcing it from different forests, even within a region. Their toasting regimes are different. There's so much that goes into these barrels that make them unique, that you can see. Sometimes it's dramatically different, but at times it can even be subtle differences that can affect the palate of the wine, the structure of the wine, showcase the fruit, add those different characteristics that we all think about when we talk about like what the oak adds to wine, whether it's mocha notes or vanilla or spices and such. But even the way that it changes the fruit um, characteristics of one wine. So you're trying the same wine in multiple different barrels, and the fruit just has all these different nuances to it. And one barrel might showcase some of the more darker notes of the Cabernet, and then the other one's going to kind of have more red fruit. And then suddenly you get like one that has like this interesting mixed berry or even blue fruit note. And you see all that, and you're just like, man, this is the part of it where you really kind of geek out. As a winemaker, we just love that moment. The blending part of the winemaking is kind of, you're almost to the end. You're putting the dish together. You're kind of just finding those special little nuances that just will make it, elevate it even further.
So, a lot of people think winemaking and they associate French oak, which they should, but American oak, I think, is making a big impression, I would say. People are starting to really like that, I think, a little bit more. Do you use some American oak, some Hungarian oak?
We do. We do a little. They're primarily in few of our wines. In our Petit Syrah, we talked about earlier, and Zinfandel, and then even our field blend, we will play with all three. We'll use French, American, and Hungarian.
In the same
To
barrel?
the end of, yeah, it's the same barrel.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a hybrid barrel, we call it. And it's literally the staves of the barrel are different. So one barrel incorporating all three different types of oak. Excuse me.
Yeah, I think that's very cool that you're doing that all in the same barrel. I've seen winemakers use the different woods for different barrels, but I think I may have heard of, but not very common that you hear of, or maybe it's becoming more common, Glenn, that they're playing with barrels like that.
Yeah, it has become more common. We first did it about 10 years ago,
Okay.
and it was literally us just working with one of the cooperages, and we traditionally was Zen and Petit Syrah is where it kind of started. We'd always used all three of those individually, and to one, initially it was like, what's the point? Why make a barrel with all three if you can do each individually? But anytime you're trialing barrels and trying new things, it's kind of like the vineyard example a moment ago. It takes several years till you decide if you did something right or wrong, or
Sure.
what you need to tweak. So we did like a 3 year, yeah, this is 3 years total comparison and trial, and tweaked it to find what we were looking for. And what made it different was that we saw all those nuances that we liked about the three individual different types of oak work together and become more integrated in the wine. And that's what we thought was fascinating about it. So we use those on a few of our wines where we find that they kind of add complexity to the wine. Now, French oak is still our overall, it's our primary oak source. But it's kind of like um, saying that you can get a Cabernet in Calistoga, um, and then you can get one down in Mount Veeder. They're going to be totally different. Well, French oak is the same thing. It can come from different regions throughout France, and they can have totally different characteristics.
Okay.
Also, the age of the oak, the grains, and how fine they are, and then of course the toasting regimes. That also has a big impact on it. So you can kind of get down the rabbit hole on oak. We could have a whole podcast just talking about it.
We may have to do
And I'd
that.
be geeking out.
So let me ask you this. What's your way of telling somebody who's gotten into wine, a little bit and says, I'm really enjoying wine and I like to drink Napa Cab. And you go, well, let's get you to try something. No. I just like Napa Cab. How do you get somebody to go, I'll expand my horizons a little bit. I'll open my mind up a little bit and try something else? What's your way of pitching them to give some other things to try? Because that's the whole world of wine, isn't it? It's a rabbit hole we never fully get down. It's a journey that's just, always going on, and we absolutely love it.
Yeah, I think that's for those of us who are, love to explore like that. It's similar to cuisine. Like you can never taste every cuisine in the world. We don't have
Sure.
enough time on this earth. So you certainly try, and that's the fun of it. Same with wine. We could never try every wine in the world. I mean, different varietals alone is a laundry list. But then thinking about that Cabernet from Napa is different than Sonoma. It's different than Bordeaux. It's different than Cabernet grown, in Paso Robles or anywhere else in the world. So having all those nuances is fun, but even just trying to convince people, um, a lot of us for wine, it's about trying to explore and understand that there are differences. But for some people, they find what they like and they gravitate towards it, and that's fine. But what I like to do, is I like to introduce them to new things, and oftentimes in our tasting room, we'll be pouring something, that's not cab, and it's kind of like, hey guys, I know you're here for cab, but let's try something different. You might not realize that you could be a fan of even Grenache.
Yeah.
It might not be the wine you're going to have with your steak, but it might be the wine you have before the steak while you're enjoying some cheese and whatnot. Um, you know, by doing so, we find so many people get, um, it opens their eyes to other varietals and how they can be fun and different and unique. Petite Syrahs, as an example, as soon as somebody says, I only like Cabernet, I'll inevitably pour them some Petite Syrah because, you're dealing with something with a large, also with a lot of tannin structure as well. Now it's different kind of fruit and there's a lot of different nuances there, but it's kind of, if you got a cab lover, oftentimes we can introduce them to Petite, and it's different, but it's a fun, different, unique something that oftentimes we can convince a cab lover into enjoying as well.
Yeah, and I always try to tell, friends that I have over that, like Napa Cab, and there's nothing, we love Napa, but I always try to tell them, whenever you say, I'm ready to explore somewhere else, get whatever you had in your mind of what wine should taste like from whatever you like out of your mind. Go into it with a clear palette of no expectations, because from, Napa to your point, Paso, just in California, or over to Bordeaux or into Piedmont, it's going to be different no matter where you go. And you need to be open to that. You need to understand, kind of what that region's about, to your point about soils and weather and things like that. And then the winemaker, what are they trying to do, and appreciate the different expressions of what they're doing. And I think once you can get people to kind of open up and not have an expectation, they seem to do a little bit better with, I think, enjoying it instead of trying to compare it.
Yeah, that's a great point, because you don't want people to have this preconceived notion of what they're about to enjoy,
Yeah.
and not to expect it to be the same as what they might be used to. You have to really be open minded about it, and when you have that, you tend to find people just that's when kind of the blinders come off, and
That's right.
they can be more open minded to it.
And then they get in trouble. Then they buy, extra fridges and more bottles.
Yeah,
And yeah, it gets a little crazy.
There's the other rabbit hole, right?
Yes, absolutely. My wife will tell you. I'm like, hey, honey, I think we're ready for a third fridge. She's like, hell no.
I do miss the days when Pam, when I first met, she was like, Australian Shirazes are great, just $10 bottle of Australian Shiraz. And she won't even look at those now.
Yeah.
It's like, I miss those days in some ways, but that's the fun of it, though. That's the exploration. That's what makes us so passionate about it.
Absolutely. Well, let's jump into your portfolio of wines. Can we talk about those?
Yeah,
Let's start with your whites, because you know which one I'm going to mention first, because it's my wife's favorite. I was going to say the varietal, but I won't. I'll let you say it because I think you know it.
Sauvignon Blanc.
Yeah, she absolutely loves that wine. So
yeah,
tell us about that one.
SB's, I often like describe it as being, Pam still uses the, more of a Texas kind of feel to it with the porch pounder scenario.
Yeah.
But bright, crisp, we try and develop it in a way that, you were looking for that nuanced fruit, but also bright acidity, and just some texture there that, for us, it's also, we're also doing a little bit of lees contact with ours. And what that does is you often find with Girard's SB that, while it is a bright acidity and bright fruit characteristics, it also has this kind of nuanced mid-palate kind of richness. I often get asked if we've used some Semillon in there, but I attribute it to how we make the wine, and it kind of develops its kind of richness to it. But we still want it to be, I think immediately of like oysters,
Yeah.
Cuisine that has that brightness, or acid-driven cuisine. And it's how we want to start our meals out, with something like that. and or on a nice warm day, that might be all we're drinking all afternoon.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then we go into your. You have a couple different Chardonnays. I'm looking at this one from the Russian River Valley in Sonoma, and then you have another. Don't you do one in Coombsville?
No, we're doing one in Carneros now
On
as well.
Carneros. Okay.
Yeah, we have estate vineyards in Carneros that we're using. So
Okay.
excited about that. That's newer for us. Again, Carneros being the southern part of Napa, the coolest region. Traditionally, that's where you find a lot of Chardonnay thrives. And the Russian River for us was always a similar ideology that is a cooler region in Sonoma, known for, again, Chardonnay, maybe Pinot Noir as well, probably equally as well known. But we've always enjoyed the Chardonnay from that region. We developed some estate vineyards in Carneros. Eventually, that became the plan, was to start making Carneros Chard as well. So that's a newer. We've only had one vintage of that so far, so we're rolling into our second vintage coming soon. But it's fun. It's a whole nother. They're just two different regions. They have different styles to them.
Does that make
We
you
get
change the
some.
process at all? Do you change the process, or is it?
Yeah, it can. It can determine some of the ways we handle the fermentations, what yeast we may use. It also will have some decision making in what cooperages we use. Again, it's all French oak in that example again, but we're sourcing from 40 different types of French oak, and
Yeah.
and moving to a different vineyard will sometimes direct us to try something different with the oak. We might try a different region. We might try a different producer, even a different toast level, just based on what that vineyard yields and the style that comes from that vineyard. So,
Does the grape
but
from
that's
by vintage to vintage does it also kind of help you determine how long you want it on oak?
yeah, for sure. I mean, even in just saying a vintage that might have been slightly riper, where we saw more sunshine to get riper. Maybe it was riper faster, or it took longer to ripen, or it just got to a point where we decided, it's time. And it just, that's the beauty of vintage, that we don't really. I think we all understand and appreciate it, but we vintage date wines, because every year can be slightly different. Even if we make the exact same wine from the very same vineyard every year, and even if we use the exact same techniques and the exact same barrels, all of these things, even with all that consistency, you should be able to see some nuances that are different from year to year. So, otherwise, we wouldn't vintage date. We just call everything non-vintage and
Yeah.
just kind of keep blending away.
Well,
But
that's
that's part of the purpose, of vintage dating.
that's why also wine geeks like me appreciate it, because then we can go back and do what we call a vertical and have one dinner and taste through 3 or 4 different bottles of the same wine from different vintages, and it's always fun to pick those out and see what the different.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's always. Well, we've talked about this next wine a couple times tonight, but it's still one of my favorites, and it's the Petit Syrah. So
Yeah.
let's get a little bit more in depth on that. What you do to make this taste as good as it does.
Well, Petit Sirah is a fun grape to play with. When I first got introduced to it years and years ago, there's a lot of examples that I tried that they were interesting, but it has such big tannins, and if you allow that to kind of drive the wine, at times in the past when I've tried other Petit Sirahs, I'd be less excited about ones that were just ripping the enamel off your teeth. So much tannin. So Girard, we've typically looked at Petit Sirah a little differently. We do some things in the fermentation side of things that are a bit different. Oftentimes, we'll bring the wine off of its skins a little earlier, as to not let it get so big and chunky and aggressive tannins, to be a little more approachable. We also try and coax out as much of the fruit as we can with the wine. And then, the other thing I'll mention is that I think of Petit Sirah and Zen as kind of like brothers, in the sense that I will often blend with them. So, and the Petit Sirahs of past with Girard, we've almost always had, averaging around 10% Zen, sometimes more, sometimes less. Occasionally, I will also play with some field blend in those blends as well, and even Rhones, on occasion. So just kind of what the vintage gives us and what we think will help kind of add some complexity to it. But Petite Syrah is the star. It's just trying to make that, you know, a little more approachable. And then we mentioned earlier about the oak regimes. The cooperage we're using for that is that mixture of French, Hungarian and American. And if I could just use a quick definition, French for me in that instance is that more classical structure. It adds more of the classical characteristics of like mocha and vanilla bean, that sort of thing. The Hungarian side of it is a lot of spice. It'll kind of impart some really nice kind of Christmas spice notes, cinnamon, nutmeg, clove even. And then lastly, the American portion of it, I find it adds more kind of a smoky, meaty note. So on the petite and the Zen, both, we'll use those barrels, and I find that really just adds more to the complexity of those two wines, so that we get more out of the wine, and it doesn't just feel like this massive, aggressive, tannin based wine. It's more of an approachable style of petite sirah.
And when you talk about the tannins, some people might think, well, then it should age well. Will this age fairly decently?
Yeah, yeah, it will. Much like with Cabernet, as the tannins soften, you'll start noticing some more of those tertiary characteristics come out. Maybe some of the more earth tones. Um, Fruit will still hold up pretty well with petite, even as it ages. I've had many of our Girard Petites 10 years later, and still really interesting wine. Now, I'll always say this about aging wine. I think it's entirely up to the person and what they look for. Just in my house, I find a lot of interest in something older, just to see all the kind of different nuances that are coming up, because as tannins start to soften, fruit diminishes a little bit, other things start to come out. I find a lot of interest in that. My wife, she finds interest in it too, but she'll take a sip or two, and then she wants to go back to something a little younger, more vibrant, more fruit forward.
Yeah.
So I think you have to kind of tell people, aging wines is kind of based on what you look for and what you like. Don't
Yeah.
overdo it. Don't.
And I had a guy who comes on the show periodically, and he actually has a question for you. So I'll mention that here in a little bit. But he's a Italian wine journalist, and one of the shows we were doing, he made something that I had never thought about when we talk about cellaring wines. He said, Rob, there's a difference between aging a wine and then just a wine will last a certain time. So, I mean, aging means it's changing in the bottle, but then it's going to reach a point where it's still good and it'll last another 5-6 years, but it's no longer changing anymore. So he said, you really have to understand what's aging, because a lot of people go, well, I don't want to drink it. I don't want to drink it. It's still, and he said, there's a certain point where it's no longer changing. Go ahead and, if you want to drink it, drink it. There's no more that's going to happen to the wine. Go ahead and enjoy it. And that was something I never really thought about. I thought it was just a continuous thing, and he made me realize it actually stops at some point. Then it starts to, you have that window of when you should drink your wines, and then it closes a little bit.
Yeah, and one of the examples I often tell people is, if you, and much like yourself and a lot of us, we have a great network of friends that enjoy the wines with us, right? And if you find something you're really enamored with, the wine that you really enjoy, buy a 6 pack of it. Even
Absolutely.
have your friends, participate. You all pitch in together and buy a case. And I think the best thing you could do if you're really that enamored with the wine is keep trying it over periods of time. Buy that 6 pack and then try the wine with those friends and family every 6 months or a year. Think about it. If you could do that, if you're, even if just a 6 pack, you could try a wine over the span of 6 years, or even every, 6 months, you try it over 3 years. You're going to see the wine just change and develop. And there may be highs and lows there. You may have times when you really, really enjoy it. There may be times where, you're like, wow, it kind of turned a different corner. I still like it, but it's not as exciting as it was a moment, or the last time we tried it. But, then suddenly you open it one time and it just knocks your socks off. And I always tell people, when you find those moments, if you're alone, unfortunately, call everybody you can, get them over there. but hopefully you're doing it in a format where you get to enjoy it with friends and family, and you get to find those, we like to call them aha moments in wine, where you find a wine that just completely knocks you over. But that to me is a really kind of fun way to look at it and share.
Love
And that's
that.
what's great about wine. Yeah.
Yeah, I did want to say when you talked about when you get to a point you might open the wine, it may not be that enamored with it. Don't give up on the other bottles that you have. That doesn't drive what all the other bottles are. It's still changing. So that was your point.
Yeah.
You don't give up on
And
it.
and sometimes you might just need to leave it in the glass and come back to it till later. Let it decant a little bit. Pam and I had, we had a moment like that in our early years together with a bottle of Chateauneuf de Pop that when we first smelled it, it was just musty and funky and just kind of odd. And I think we could have easily just said, no good, dump it out. But we came back to that wine like 15 minutes later or so, and it knocked us over. It was just, we could
Wow.
not stop describing it. And those are the moments when you realize that wine is alive. It's constantly changing, develop. Sometimes, very slowly, but once you open a bottle and the air starts hitting it, especially on something older, there's all kinds of peaks and valleys that are going to come up pretty quick. So
Yeah.
it's fun to see all that.
Well, you mentioned the Zin a little bit with the Petit Syrah, and your Zin. I mean, I think Zin is a very underrated varietal. I don't think it gets enough love. Maybe it does, but I don't see it, amongst our friends. I'm always trying to get them to drink more Zin because I think it's a fantastic grape. But when you put Old Vine Zin on there, people are going to wonder, okay, what does that mean? So what does that mean to the wine drinker when he sees Old Vine?
Well, there's not a legal definition of that.
Okay,
To be clear, we actually years ago, when I first took on the role of winemaker, we got audited by the TTB, which is a government agency that controls
labeling.
everything.
Yeah,
Yeah, and they audited us for that very reason. They just wanted to understand what was considered old wine to us, and so for us, we're about average 50 years, a little over actually, on the vines we source from. And I even asked them at the time, "Are you going to create some kind of rule or requirement of that?" And they said, "No, we're not doing that. We just want to understand." But ultimately, for us, there's several sources that we use throughout Napa, but the two primary, one of them is what I would refer to as a younger vine, old vine. It's down in the southeastern part of Napa. Just you're practically in the town of Fairfield, and those are more in the 50-year range. And those there's even more brightness and vibrancy and fruit characteristics from that vineyard. But then the other main source for that blend comes from Calistoga. It's right up the road from us at our new winery, and these are vines that are over 100 years old. Um, these century-old vines that are now being managed by the fourth generation. I was working with mom for the longest time. She was third generation. Mom's getting away from the business, kind of, not doing as much anymore. And now the daughter's taking over. But we're getting 100-plus-year-old wine
oh
in from
wow.
them. And that's, I often describe them as like, the old vines the really old stuff from this Calistoga vineyard, the 100-year-old, is really interesting. But for us, the blend we're trying to make, we need some of those, the 50-year-old vines in to kind of complement each other. It tends to add that vibrancy that we want to see in our Zin. So while we really appreciate and love the Zin we get from these 100-year-old vines, for us, we like the combination of the two to add complexity to the blend. And then, you think about all the other things I mentioned, like with the Petite, with the barrel program and such, you can kind of coax out some more of those characteristics that you want to see in Zin. And I think I said it earlier, but we also blend with Petit Syrah. So the Zin will typically have some Petit Syrah in it as well.
Awesome. Okay, one of my favorites that you guys offer, the GSM blend, because you mentioned Chateauneuf de Pop, and I'm a huge fan. So is Sandra. But the GSM blend, and I think you do it really, really well. I love that it's 14.5% alcohol, which Napa standards is a little bit lower than what you typically see. 15 plus you see quite frequently.
Yeah, yeah. For me, I've always been a fan of Chateauneuf. That story I mentioned earlier was kind of one of my first real, like, fell in love with wines from that region. And there it's the Southern Rhone. It's Grenache is dominant there, but kind of the same mentality that they play with other grapes to blend with. And the two two most obvious are Syrah and Mourvedre. And these GSM blends have kind of they've been around for a while, but it's again kind of our nod to the history. In this example, back in France, much like with Bordeaux, but now we're in the Rhone, and we know we're different. We know we're riper, getting our riper grapes for this blend, but we still wanted to have those nuances that you expect from Grenache blends, as an example. Just those kind of softer, lighter red fruit notes, some really interesting spice components. We even see some really kind of characteristically, I almost always find this somewhere between the line of like a marmalade to something like you know, speaking of bourbon, like a really fancy old fashioned where they literally lit the oils off of the orange. That characteristic. Every time I make this blend, I always find it in the background, and of course, immediately makes me want some bourbon with it on the side. Want some bourbon, not with it necessarily, but it just evokes that characteristic. So this blend is fun. We have a source for the Grenache and the Mourvedre portion on the northeastern side of Napa. It's on the other side of Howell Mountain, and then the Syrah comes from a vineyard in Yountville for us. And just really, it's one of my blends that I love introducing people to. We don't make a lot of it. It's kind of more of a wine club and winery only thing. You won't see it out in distribution, but it's a labor of love in that sense that we, again about it's one of the specials that we like to
Yeah.
have something different.
It's a good one. It's one of our favorites, so we appreciate you making that one. Here's the one that I think, for me, I always, and you mentioned it kind of earlier about taking this bottle along with a couple others, that one, gets people to ask some questions, and two, gets drank pretty quick. And that's your mixed blacks. So I mentioned earlier that John Fodera is the Italian wine journalist from New York who he messaged me and said, okay, you got to find out for me what's in this. I'm curious. And I said, all right, we'll ask Glenn and see what he can tell us about it.
Well, we'll solve his curiosity and his answer with a very eluding answer here.
Everything.
Well, yeah, and I guess the thing is, like, we don't officially know. Let's say that. And I say that because this is that same vineyard that I mentioned a moment ago that we get the 100-year-old vine Zinfandel from. Field blend, it's the original parcel that the family had planted. And this is 120-something-year-old vines. And, when we first started making this wine, I remember because it was the very first year I started at Girard. 2006 was our first vintage of this. And we were playing around with how we were going to name it. And for half a second, it was, we wanted to be an homage to like the days of old. And there was use the term homage. Well, somebody's already got that. We even talked to them for half a second about it, calling it Godfather or something like that, just to kind of give this. And that wouldn't work out. So, but the original term for these old field blends where you don't really know everything that's in them. The TTB has often called them either mixed blacks or mixed whites. Is the terminology they use. So that's where we decided to go with. And these vines, we don't know exactly what's in there. We assume a lot. We're pretty sure this is Zan and Petit Syrah. We believe there to be Rhone varietals in there. There's even some white grapes intermixed. And what's important to us isn't being able to define exactly what's in there. It's more about the characteristics and the uniqueness of it. And so there's actually techniques nowadays where we could pay for the vineyard to get DNA sequenced and mapped. And even the vineyard owner, she's less interested in that as well. She's like, if you're happy with the grapes, that's what's important to me.
Yeah.
So for us, we've always kind of thought of this as more as that homage. If you move to Napa or somewhere in California from, let's say, a small village in Europe, Italy, or somewhere in France, you would often move there with clippings of all the different grape varietals that came from your village. And much like you have a cow for your milk and chickens for your eggs and vegetable garden for that, you're going to probably have a small vineyard and you're going to make home wine. It's just part of your culture, and you're going to drink it usually with lunch and dinner every single day. It's part of the land and it's part of your meal. And so for us, it's kind of that's what Mixed Blacks is. It's the homage to the days of old. And you know, while wine has become commercialized and we now make wine to sell wine, for us, it's fun to be able to go back in history and see that. And I'll mention to that end, you can't see it really on this picture, but as you're driving into our new winery, this picture that's on our background here, on either side of the road, we've planted. As you drive in on the right side, we've done a mixed white field blend. We've even planted it in the traditional head prune style. So literally a stick in the ground, you grow it up and you kind of shape it. Versus more conventional, where we use trellising and we're using a lot of science to how we plant. This is more of the old world, old school. And then on the other side of the driveway, we planted a red field blend. So I didn't mention it, but the white side is Viognier, Marsanne, and Roussanne. So back to the Rhone there.
Yep.
To be able to make a mixed white field blend. And then on the other side is more of a mixed reds or mixed blacks field blend. And that is Zin, Petit Syrah, Grenache, Mourvedre, and Carignan.
Okay.
So, and we even told our vineyard manager to interplant them. Don't tell us what's what. Now you can walk it and you can figure out things, like especially on the white side. I can tell Viognier from Marsanne. It's pretty easy.
Yeah.
Similarly on the red side, but the idea was that we were, kind of mimicking and going back to the history of Napa and California, of having these wines that have, a lot of history with just field blends. And so we this is our first year to make wine off of it. I'm pretty excited. It came out really well. I'm really excited about it. But for us, it's like, we only got 100 years to go to catch up to that Blacks field blend. But
yeah.
It's still really fun and interesting wine to play with.
Yeah, it's one of our favorites. I mean, one, because just the story behind it, like you're talking about, but two, it's really good. I mean, I don't know what all you do to make it as good as it is, but it's really good.
Yeah, I mean, I'll always point to the vineyard first. That's the starting point.
Yeah,
the source.
Don't screw it up. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
All right.
For the longest time, all of our harvest T-shirts have a little. They're usually hidden somewhere in there, but all of our harvest T-shirts have as DFIU somewhere on the shirt.
I like that.
We tell our team DFIU. Don't F it up.
I might steal that from you, DFIU. I like that. All right. You knew my wife's favorite wine from you guys. I'm guessing you know mine.
Well, I'm assuming we're going into Cab here.
Cab Franc.
Oh, no, Franc.
Yeah.
Sorry, Franc.
Yeah. So tell us about, I mean, I love this wine from you. And where did you all start? And by you all, I mean you, but also maybe Napa, if somebody else kind of led the way on this. You'd mentioned earlier Cab Franc, Petit Verdot, Malbec, typically thought of as that blending grape, right? But now we're seeing more and more of all three of those varietals kind of standing on their own and being the dominant grape in a wine. And where did that who kind of figured that out? Where did that come from? Do you know? Well,
I don't know that I could point to, specifically all the different grape varietals that we used to blend with. There's obviously wineries in Napa that became known for let's say Merlot.
Yeah.
Rutherford Hill back in the day. One of our sister wineries is Swanson, long known for their Merlot. But there were kind of earlier adapters to Cab Franc too. One of my favorites traditionally, Lawson. There's one, Viognier makes one. There's a handful of wineries that kind of had some history with Franc. But we often looked at it more for blending purposes. And earlier I alluded to, it adding really kind of some interesting aromatic components to the wine. But I think if you find the right vineyards for it, And I say that because if you're not careful with Cab Franc, you won't get ripe enough, in which you'll lean more towards its greener characteristics. I don't mind having a little kind of background of certain like dried herb notes and that sort of thing in Franc. But there is Franc that's grown in Napa and other places where it's a little too green. You know, just doesn't quite have enough fruit there. But when we find those vineyards, which we have several, one of which is a vineyard over in what's called Pope Valley. Um, we've been sourcing from there. That vineyard's called Temple Vineyard. We've been doing that for since I've been at Girard. So it's again 15 plus years been working with this vineyard, and the Cabernet Franc from there is just fantastic. Like I love it. We get some off of Diamond Mountain as well, another great example. But when you get it, you know, ripe and you can get, you know, even some structure out of it, which that's something else we like when we can find that, you know, it's a relative to cabs, Cabernet Sauvignon, so you expect it to have some of those nuances. Um, but get some of that structure built in the wine. Some of that is the grapes themselves, but also how we handle them, fermentation and aging. And then, you know, get that fruit, but then still in the background with Cab Franc, it's this aromatic component, you know. It can be a bold in some ways, but then very feminine in others as far as the aromatics go.
Yeah, one of my favorite, and you mentioned the mountain Cab Franc that you guys get, and absolutely love that one as well. I mean, it's delicious. And I want to mention that you guys also release a Malbec and a Petit Verdot as well, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're fans of that, it's there. And the point here is to go through and let everybody know that what I love about wineries is I think a lot of times, Glenn, you can tell me if I'm wrong, in whatever market you're in, for example, Girard, here we can get, your Cab, your Sauv Blanc, your Petit Syrah. We get your other Cab, the name with the A on it.
Yeah, artistry.
Artistry. Thank you. Boy, I couldn't
a red
say.
wine blend.
Yeah, I love that one. But we don't get everything. And what I love is when you find a wine that you like in your area, and then we go visit you guys in Napa, and then we see all these other wines that you have, and then being able to taste through and start enjoying those. That's where people want to join the wine club and have more exposure to that, and being able to come out and participate in events that you all do and special offerings that you all have. And so that's the whole point of this, is to help people kind of get more exposed to different wines from the same producer that you love, but the different expressions that they make. And I think that's part of the fun of the journey of wine.
Agreed. Yeah. It's where we start to geek out about it, right? Like we have, you know what you enjoy from them, but wow, I didn't realize you also make a Viognier for the white wines. We have our, as you mentioned, all these different Bordeaux that we bottle separately, Malbec, Petit Verdot. Those are really fun, something different you don't get to see everywhere. But even the GSM blend, mixed blacks, and then in the Cab front, I, on any given year, we're at least 6, 7 different Cabernet blends, up to 9. So that's a lot of fun for me.
That's
to
a
be able to
lot of
play with
fun.
all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's jump into, I have a couple of your mountain cabs here. I have the Mountain Veeder and I have the Diamond Mountain, but I know you do some other ones as well. Let's just talk about your mountain series in general.
Yeah, so we've long sourced diamonds going back to the very first mountain fruit that we kind of started in that category, Diamond Mountain. Around about the same time, we also started a Mount Veeder program, and then Atlas came thereafter. Um, Howell Mountain and Spring Mountain, the other kind of two acclaimed regions in Napa as far as mountain fruit go. Um, those two have been kind of intermittent. I've had years where we've had sourcing. I mentioned earlier about the fun thing about being able to explore and all these different vineyards is awesome, but at times it also means that you don't own them, so things can change. Vineyards want to start making their own wine, or they change hands. So occasionally we'll lose a source that we really were enjoying working with or enamored with. But at times it just means we're looking for the next best one. And as an example, with Howell Mountain, we've had three different sources over the years. We're now using one that I'm really excited about. I was alluding to making our blends right now for some of the 2019 cab bottlings. And yesterday we were going through a dozen different Howell Mountain barrels, and that was that moment of just like, man, I wish I could bottle this. There's just so many different nuances, right? But all these different mountain regions, and we even started a few years back making a blend called Mountain Cuvée. And the idea there is that, in addition to all the, looking at those different regions because they are unique and different, but let's take the best of all of the Napa regions and kind of make one blend. So we make a blended Mountain Cuvée as well that's from all these different mountain areas. So you can find that on occasion with us. It's just referred to as the Mountain Cuvée. And then even beyond the mountain series, we work with the other kind of known sub AVAs. So we have an Oakville cab. We just bottled the 2019, and it's spectacular. It's really delicious. I'm really proud of it. Rutherford's another one that we really enjoy making. Another region. It's one of the first regions I started working in Rutherford, so I was very excited to be able to make wine from there as well. And then more recently, when we moved up to our new winery in Calistoga, we started making a Calistoga AVA wine too. So for me, all these different regions, the mountain fruit areas, sourcing, and then even these sub AVAs otherwise, this is where you really kind of get to explore and get to see all these different nuances from these different sub AVAs. It's again 30 by 5, right? But you
Yeah.
have all this different uniqueness in it, and these sub appellations are a big part of why people really enjoy Napa, even if they don't really fully understand it. For us, when we get the chance to pour them a few just for next to each other, that's when it kind of just starts people's mind, just kind of like, and the exploration begins.
Right.
So I really love being able to produce these as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Um, is there anything else that we missed? I'm glad you mentioned that cuvee. I saw that online, and I didn't realize that was out now, and I need to get a bottle of that or a couple bottles of that. That looks really good and interesting, and so I'm glad you mentioned that one. But I wanted to
Yeah.
mention that join the wine club. Absolutely get online. You don't have to go to Napa to join the wine club. You can do it through your all's website at Girard. But also, if you don't want to join a wine club, you can still go on and explore a little bit and just buy the bottles of wine through your website and have them shipped to you. And this is, to me, this is wine season. This is the time. If you're going to order wine from California, this is the time to do it because it can ship. So no better time
Don't
than
order
right
in
now.
July.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
But
between Napa and Houston, the weather's not cooperating all along the way. So
have you seen our
that's why
temps
it's
over
cool.
here?
No, I haven't noticed. You guys are
Uh,
going to be cold, I heard.
well, today and tomorrow it's like in the 50s, and then we're right back in the 80s next week.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, so shorts and flip flops, kind of like California. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
It's very sunny out right now, even though it's still supposed to be 50-something degrees.
yeah. But joining your wine club is a big thing because it gives them an opportunity. You have different levels of wine clubs, Glenn. And if you're just a red fan, you don't like wine, white wines, you can stay in a reds package, a whites package, a blended package. So there's all kinds of opportunity there when you get into your different wine clubs that you guys offer.
Yeah, and to your point, if you just want to, initially explore, we can put together anything, if you want. We also do something kind of fun. I like to tout it because it's, oftentimes it's not just about the expense of the wine; it's how much it costs to ship, which is
Yeah.
can be crazy. Some places, a case of wine to Houston is, 100 and something, $120, right? We've long had the mentality that we want to help with that. So um, our pricing on shipping is really competitive. It's more of us just kind of, a nod to our customers that we don't want you to be scared of shipping costs as that being just this additional amount. So, as an example, a 6-pack is like $9.99 to ship. Oftentimes, full case we'll do all but free. We'll charge you a penny. On certain times of the years, we have specials like that. But we always try and be very competitive with the shipping because you put all this together, and then you go to the cart to cash out, and all of a sudden you've got another $100 and something in shipping and handling costs. It's like, wait, what happened?
Yeah.
So we've long been of the mindset we don't want that surprise when you're ready to get it all put together and shipped. So I like touting that because it's something that not a lot of places do.
And I think it's a huge benefit to people, when you go, well, I'd order 3 or 4 bottles. Well, at that shipping cost, you might as well order 6 because your shipping cost goes down so much. It offsets the cost. You're getting more wine, basically for what you would have paid in shipping. So I think that's a great point. Anything else about Napa? Coming and visiting you guys? You guys are open right now. Are you open all week? Or are you only open on with all the COVID, I don't know what wineries are doing right now.
Yeah, well, we're open now. Most wineries, like I mentioned earlier, we still have restrictions of all as far as like wearing a mask when you walk in or if you're walking around. But otherwise, and the staff will be wearing masks. But once you sit down, you're there to enjoy. We have, we're going to pour a variety of different tastings to offer. In the case of Girard, we also can offer some, some snacks, a little charcuterie, cheese, that sort of thing. But just Napa in general, it's open for business. The restaurants are open. As much as we love talking about wine, Napa has some amazing food. And the restaurants, as with everywhere, have struggled through the pandemic. And, we do everything we can to help support them.
Absolutely.
It's one of those things. It's great to see the ones that have been able to hang on, and now they're starting to get busy again. And we want to do everything we can to support them. So as far as people coming out here, we are open and ready for business. And if you get a chance to come visit,
is Girard open 7 days a week now?
Yeah, we're 7 days a week.
Okay, now. Cool. Yeah, I've seen some places are like Tuesday through Sunday or Wednesday through Sunday.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are still trying to find what fits for them for now. But right now we're 7 days.
Cool. Need a reservation? Need to call ahead and make an appointment?
Yeah, we are one of those wineries that we ask that we have to have a reservation. So we oftentimes just even if you're out somewhere else and you're thinking, well, we might be able to make it by Girard, call them in, see if we have an opening. If we can get you in, we will.
And I also want to mention, you mentioned a couple times coming in, you got to wear a mask, but you have some great outdoor seating at this new facility as well. I mean, love sitting outside and looking at the vines, and just this time of year, I know you said 50s right now, but I mean, it gets into the 60s. To me, that's very pleasant to be outside. And
yeah, for me, big warm bodied guy.
Yeah.
I'll still be in those shorts and flip flops, but yeah, we've got heaters as well, little propane heaters out there if need be. We often offer a blanket if somebody's chilly, but to me, this is the best time of year to come out to Napa. Even before I lived here, it was always my favorite time to come out. Early part of December, even in late November, you see this just mirage of color. Like this tapestry of all the leaves have changed to reds and yellows and oranges. It's just beautiful, but it's also a little calmer, a little quieter. A lot of people like to come out during harvest, which we'll welcome you then as well. But that's the busier time, a lot of hustle and bustle. This time of year, you get, kind of a more relaxed and engaged experience, I think, in most places because it is calmed down. It's quieter. It's not as busy. So it's one of my favorite times of the year to be out here.
Yeah, absolutely. We agree. We typically come, we turn the calendar and come when, either late January, early February, but that's you don't get to see the pretty green and all of that, but we get to enjoy more time with people like you. And that's really what we like to, enjoy the wine. We get to talk and visit with the people who are actually making things happen. That's what I enjoy. So, well, Glenn, I appreciate you taking some time and coming on and visiting with us today.
Absolutely. It's always wonderful for me to get to talk to my Texas family, and we love where we're from. We love living out in Napa and working here, but we're from there, and it's always going to be a part of us. So we always want to be a part of it.
Well, thanks again, Glenn, for coming on. I enjoyed the conversation. Hopefully we can do more of these in the future and catch up with you again.
Sounds good, Rob. I appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody, for joining on this episode of Food, Wine, and Whiskey in Your Own Backyard. And until our next episode, enjoy your next pour.